I am super excited about this conversation today. So I'm going to have to catch myself because I think I'm going to get ahead of myself. I'm not excited about this conversation. So welcome everybody on this Thursday afternoon. I hope maybe you're enjoying a lunch break. So we're going to get into it. You have heard me talk many a times that a candidate can't do everything in order for them to have electoral success. And you've heard me say and talk about the advocacy arm. Josh, can you throw up for the screen for our viewers what it truly takes for a candidate to be successful? All the things they have to get up to. We call these phases of a campaign cycle. As you can see, folks, there is a lot to do, from voter registration, educating voters, data management, working with donors on the regular. So what we have a tendency to do here in Indiana is, boom, all that falls on the shoulders of a campaign. We have got Jocelyn Vare, former candidate here. I'm sure she can relate. That's a heavy lift for candidates to have to activate. What we know, other states that are finding success is when they're working in tandem within the guardrails of our advocacy arm. I call that the 501c3, the 501c4. That's why I'm so excited, because states need to be successful when we complete the triangle. A strong state party, a strong advocacy arm, and really amazing candidates. And we're super excited this election cycle because we have 25 all seats going contested on the Senate side and 92 candidates thus far on the House side. If you're still thinking of running on the House side and your seat is open, you can get caucus in. I want to make sure we get that public announcement out there. So today we have two amazing people who work on that advocacy arm side, that soft side. So I am going to toss it over to both of them and let them introduce themselves and their amazing organization. So let's start with Jocelyn Vare, the Executive Director of Recenter Indiana. Jocelyn, welcome.
Thank you, Mary. Thanks for having me. My name is Jocelyn Vare, and I currently serve as the Executive Director of Recenter Indiana. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. I've been on board with the organization for about 7 months. We are about 3 years old, and our focus is very simple. We focus on reminding elected officials to center on Hoosiers' priorities. That is very simple, but something that is needed today for sure. I'm excited to be here and share with you our organization's work about young adults and learning from them. And quickly, my personal background, as Mary said, I used to be an elected official. I was the first Democrat elected for Fisher City Council at large. And then I was also a candidate for state senate. So I definitely appreciate everything a candidate has to do. And I'm very thankful to be on this side now working with Recenter Indiana.
Awesome. Thank you and welcome. And now I want to toss it over to Rianne Henderson. She's the Deputy Director of Count Us In. Welcome, Rianne.
Hi, really excited to be here as well and get to learn more from Jocelyn as well. But as Mary said, my name is Rianne Henderson. I'm the Deputy Director of Count Us Indiana. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit who we target the Black, Brown, BIPOC, disabled, and incarceration-impacted community in particular, which I think is a really special niche, and it's one that often goes underserved and underrepresented. And I'm excited to talk a little bit about our Indiana youth voter data and how we collected that. On the personal side, I have a background in human resources, primarily talent acquisition, and more recently, a little HR generalist work. I've been with Count Us Indiana about 4 years, and we celebrated our 5th birthday back in November.
Awesome. Okay, welcome. Okay, I'm so excited for this conversation. I don't know where to start first. What I will say is some interesting data. When you know me, everybody knows me, I like to look at my data. One thing that I'll get us rolling with before you each have some additional insights is we know the youth voting demographic is increasing voter participation, but not the rate we want them to. But here's a fun statistic that I came across when I was looking at voter statistic in the state of Indiana. In 2024, Indiana was one of the 3 states that voted for Kamala Harris. The voting demographic improved voting for Kamala Harris over Biden in 2020. So I think that's really interesting. When we reach out to our young voters, they will vote. So that's why your work is so important. I hear that on the regular when campaigns are figuring out strategy. Who do we talk to? How do we engage the youth out there? And a lot of them, I pause because we have to be honest and have real conversations. We can hold two truths at the same time. Limited resources require really strategic outreach. And so they have a tendency to say, well, they don't vote on the regular, so I'm going to focus over here. To me, that's a losing long-term strategy. That's why the work that you folks do is so important to offset that. So Jocelyn, you just conducted a study. We know that the youth vote in Indiana is and has declined over the years. It ticks up in some regions, and it's ticking down and not happening in others. So you did a big, vast study. So tell me about the study, what you found, what instituted the study, like what triggered you folks to actually put some resources in this demographic, 35 to 18-year-old voters.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think we all know Indiana ranks pretty low for civic participation and voter turnout.
Yeah.
2024, a presidential election, over 1.8 million registered Hoosiers did not vote. And that's a 62% voter turnout. It's one of the worst in the nation.
Yep.
But we also learned, and I credit the Tough Circle voting report, reported that only 39% of young Hoosiers voted in the 2024 presidential election, only 39%. And that was much lower than the national average for that age group, which was 47%.
Yep, I saw that.
We know we have work to do, but young adults are the second largest age group in our state. So the potential of these voters, and not only could they make an impact, but most importantly, they deserve to make an impact, right? So we were very fortunate to receive a grant to do a very robust research study. And we did a focus group and a survey. And this was conducted last fall. And we surveyed 18 to 34-year-old young adults who lived in Marion and the Donut counties, who were registered and ready to vote in 2024, but did not.
Okay.
So these were that age group who did not vote for the presidential election. And we can talk about, whenever you're ready, Mary, my overall findings. But I will say, importantly, just one more note about our study is that we're a nonpartisan organization. We worked with two research firms, both from DC. One usually works with Republicans, one usually works with Democrats, and we asked them to work together. And that was a first for me. And I'm happy to say it worked beautifully. So we have a really good, robust, nonpartisan study, and we have broadcast the findings openly. You can find that at recenterindiana.org. Crosstabs, top lines, all the juicy data is available for everyone.
Awesome. I think that's so important for you to call out that two things I really can relate to with your study. One, you had a nonpartisan study. You brought two groups together because that's really important, because their lenses are going to be really different in how they approach that. And secondly, you did twofold. You did a focus group, which is more sentiment analysis, which is more how people really feel. And then you did a survey, because surveys can be tweaked. There's biases built in. The way you ask the question, how someone interprets the question really plays into it. So having such a robust study from both lenses, both angles, really highlights the juiciness of what we're going to dive into. So, okay, I'm anxious to get at it, but let's toss it over here to Rianne. Talk to me about your studies and what you have been doing to learn more about your demographic and what we know about their voting habits.
Yes, of course. Well, in 2025, we hosted our third cohort of Racial Justice and Accessibility Fellows, and a part of their project was to create a civic engagement survey. So this was kind of at the guidance of our staff and our board members, and the purpose of the survey was really just to capture the issues about what Hoosiers care about the most, as well as thinking about those barriers and those opportunities opportunities and sentiments around voting. The survey was kind of shared at a variety of community tabling events, and we did an entire Pride tour this past summer, so we were able to get a handful of responses, and we pretty much extracted the youth vote, which was 18 to 34, which I'm super excited about because that is my peer group. So it's really interesting to see
Mhm.
data from people who are my peers. And we did find an overwhelming amount that people think that the system is broken, and it's unfortunate, and it impacts their willingness to want to vote.
Yeah, it's funny. It's interesting that you said that as your first highlight of point that you're bringing forth, that the young voters feel the system is broken. And I was just down in Knox County doing a training and talking with the county group and those who are running. And one thing that I really frame it in messaging is the contract is broken. And when, in terms of government is supposed to be the neutral arbitrator, the social contract, but they're not. They're siding with the corporate entities and they're benefiting more than the everyday folks. And when we start thinking about it that way, it really highlights to me that we're on the right track when we start messaging how to bring people into the political process if they can see themselves as not the ones to be blamed. The contract is broken, it's the system is broken. The struggles or the challenges that you're facing in life are not your fault. The struggles of getting that first job, or the struggles of owning your own home, or finding adequate housing within in terms of rental. The system is presenting challenges to you. It's not that you haven't tried hard, worked hard, got a good education. So I think that's a really good call out. Okay, I want to toss it over to you, Jocelyn. Give me some top level highlights, or however you want to share with the audience. What did
Sure.
you discover in your research, in your focus groups and survey?
Great. So we did have a little hypothesis going in,
Hmm.
and that was everyone talks about voter apathy, right? Voters that have just checked out, citizens that just don't care and have checked out and are removed from the civic engagement process and the voting process. That hypothesis was completely disproved. Um,
Okay, talk to
we,
me about that because we hear that
yeah,
all the time. I've even said that, so educate me. Yep,
right. So I think
yep.
that is the conventional wisdom, but that is not at all what we discovered.
Okay.
So again, this age group, 18 to 34-year-olds who did not vote last time, um, they are not apathetic. They really, really care, but they are very distrustful of government, very distrustful of political parties, completely disappointed. They feel like their vote doesn't matter. They feel like they're not listened to.
Hmm.
They really care about what's happening in their country, in their state, with their peer groups, but they are facing some significant obstacles to voting, and consider them election day barriers. Of the set that we surveyed, which was over 300 young adults, 45% had never voted before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that was surprising as well. How I know that they are not apathetic and don't care was only 9% of these non voters said that they were not interested. Only 9%. So we've got a problem here,
Yeah.
right? They're engaged, they're informed, but they're distrustful. They are disappointed by politics, they are disappointed by government, they are very disappointed by political parties, but they care. They're very interested, and they want to vote. And I'll land here for now. One of the so those feelings are getting in the way where they feel like, what's the point? Like, I care, but what's the point of me voting? My vote doesn't matter. But also, there are some significant election day barriers that are not helping them to encourage them to vote. And we have to address both of those things importantly, and then I'll stop and take a breath. But the young adults that we surveyed, we asked them how they felt about mail-in voting. That was a hard
Really?
no about mail-in voting. And let's be honest, when's the last time any of us actually put a stamp on
True.
something and put it mail.
That's true.
So
Yeah, yeah.
it makes
Okay, that's
sense.
the
And
framing. Yep,
we all know
yep.
mail-in voting is clunky. And okay, so that was a hard no for them. But we asked them also about early voting. Many of our counties have very robust early voting opportunities. They were completely unfamiliar with early
Ah,
voting,
man.
had no idea about that opportunity. So therefore, they felt like they got one shot at it on one day, on election day, 12 hours from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. to go out and vote. And these are busy people, some with
Yep.
young families, many with jobs, many with responsibilities. That is a hard, big ask. And that was, for the folks we talked to, insurmountable.
Whoa. Okay. I know I read the report beforehand, but when you hear it out loud, it's like a lot comes at you. I want to pass it over to you, Rianne, because before I pass it over to you, I also want Josh to put up something. I work with the candidates all the time. When I say voting is about emotions, Josh, will you put up that little graphic for me? And I say this all the time. Josh is going to toss it up. And it's the one that talks about emotions. Less a marketplace of ideas than a marketplace of emotions. And when I hear and a lot of the stuff or reasons or the whys behind young people are voting, there's a lot of emotional stuff embedded in there, because once people kind of get turned off, they're not going to vote. It's not about policy. It is not about policy. It's about impact and emotion. So, Rianne, the things that Jocelyn just laid out, the elements, does that track with the research you're seeing in your studies and the work that you did in 2025?
100%. As Jocelyn said, younger voters aren't apathetic to wanting to vote as well. We did survey more than just younger voters, but for the sake, about 29% of voters 35 and up said that they felt that their vote didn't matter, which is only compared to about 19% of youth voters in our particular study. But it's not laziness. We look at a holistic approach of canvassing. So if you don't have food on your table, or if you can't make your bill payment, of course, voting is not going to be at the top of your priority. And then I think that's kind of exasperated by the fact that people feel like their politicians don't necessarily represent them or don't necessarily care about their best interests, such as getting food on that table. And on a personal note about mail-in voting, I know it's not the most accessible. I think that it could be beneficial if candidates maybe assisted with giving stamps to students. I know when I was in college and having to vote absentee, I didn't receive that. So that was a really interesting point as well, that saying no to mail-in voting. But I definitely think that even if you wanted to do it, it's certainly a barrier to that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We forget that in Indiana, especially, also on the federal level and the state level, they have instituted many barriers and obstacles to make it more challenging to participate in civic engagement and vote, because voting is the number one thing you can do to change how your future is. And yeah. So that's a call out. I think we need to really hear that and own that. Anybody who's working in the political space and electoral space is knowing that they're not apathetic. Young voters are not apathetic, but there is things, really tangible things, getting in their way from voting. I know from our surveys, and this was the adults that we were asking in 2022, after the election, the summer of 2023, we were walking and doing some door knocking in quite a bit of neighborhoods. We had quite a bit of people going out talking about voting and asking them, okay, according to the rules, you are a registered voter, but yet you chose not to vote. And, sitting on the porch was a gentleman who had a family, and he was exactly stating what you folks have both called out. Wanted to vote, working, expected to vote at the end of the day, but at work, he got delayed. His shift went over and he had to stay longer. Thus, at 6 o'clock, he tries to vote. Done. It's not going to happen. So we have to figure out ways. And it's really interesting. We have to change our lens. We're in the weeds here. We know what early voting is. That's not everybody. So I think that's a really good call out. I want to circle back to Rianne. You mentioned politicians do not represent them. You hear this a lot from folks saying we need more experience. And I kind of push back. It's not necessarily about experience. It's about whether or not the person represents the community that they want to lead. So talk to me more about that and what you learned from talking to young voters and in your research. What does that mean to them, and how can we look to change that?
One interesting thing that we pulled from our survey is that younger voters tend to care about a variety of issues, and they found that a lot of their representation may be only focusing on one big issue. So I think that's one factor in particular. And even kind of talking to people within my peer group, I know it's interesting to see that, oh, there's a lot of talk of, I guess, for an example, an economic perspective, but we're not thinking about how can we get food access or education access. And a lot of these are kind of interchangeable as well. And I think a lot of it is also including the state of the world in general in the United States role in various things across the globe. And they're feeling that their elected officials and their politicians aren't really recognizing that side of it as well. And I think there's definitely a little bit of a moral compass going as well.
Mm-hmm. Did you find in your study that access to elected officials and candidates when they're running for office, did any of your young voters find that they didn't feel like there was an on-ramp for them to be engaged in the process, so they could have their issues and concerns heard?
We found that we host a program called Democracy Divas. A lot of people don't actually know how to contact their elected officials, and that's one of the things we kind of train them to do. So I will say that group is a lot of a older population, but I think that the younger voters can definitely benefit as well. And I don't think a lot of people know how to contact their voters. We did find that within our survey, it was around 50, 60-ish% that a lot of younger voters want to be involved in more than just voting. They want to civically engaged in other ways as well. And I think kind of bridging that gap between how to contact their offices can be a start.
Right. From candidates, Jocelyn, I see you shaking your head. What resonates with you when Renee is talking?
Well, it reminds me, and I am so fortunate to have been in partnership with Countess N. And so we have compared notes. And although we did very different studies, I think our findings absolutely complement each other. So I'm grateful we can be here. We're coming at it from different angles, but really our insights are very complementary. One of the things that we learned that again reflects what Rianne just was talking about too is about there is some hopefulness here. Like we are learning from these young adults, well, what do you need to get you to the polls? What would you need? And what we heard was they need to feel that voting is convenient or accessible. And that's important. I think there's some engagement there that an education that we can do about early voting, about mail-in voting, especially for college students. So that's a component. But here's something that I found very hopeful. We heard from them that they wanted convenience and candidates. And they want to learn about candidates who care about them. Candidates who seem genuine, who seem honest. This gets back to your slide you just had about this kind of heart issue, this emotional connection, right?
Yeah.
They want to have trust in these candidates. They want to feel like they are invited to the process. They want to feel that they're heard. They want a candidate who simply talks and cares about the issues they care about. And as Rianne heard, like affordability off the charts, right? For this demographic, actually probably for us all, affordability in all of its forms in daily living is their top priority. And if a candidate ignores that, I think young adults are going to ignore that candidate. Yeah. So I think that I just want to say that's my personal opinion, but I mean, that's
what it's a really good call out. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so they want to vote, they want to have a say, and they want to be listened to. And when you think about it, that we can do that. We can do that, and they deserve that.
Right. This conversation really gives me hope because there's some gaps. We're clearly calling out the gaps. I'm a process person, ENTJ. Find out what the gaps are, develop a process to solve it. It's not that complicated when we work together. And I love how you folks are working together, sharing notes and finding ways that you can lean into and figuring out what a strategy is. Because when I look at before this conversation, I was going back 2022 and 2024. And what stands out to me is in three of our House races, three of them, one was lost by 818 and 10 votes. One was lost by 333 and one was lost by 242. When you talk about the number of folks that were not engaging, imagine what would happen if we started to engage a multitude of young voters, how those numbers could potentially and have a big opportunity to shift, especially going into the 2026 election. And the other, what you're saying, it really tracks what we talked about last week when we had the folks with Civitech on, when we were doing a voter registration, data-driven voter registration. And one of the things that Brandon called out was the reason why their program is so successful, because it's an invitation to participate. When people get an invitation to participate, whether it's with a campaign, whether it's to vote, it's step one in building a relationship. Because I think sometimes we forget bringing people into the civic process is developing a relationship with your community. Did you find any of that relating to what you were finding, Rianne, in your studies? Because I look at it as, let me just pin this too, in the studies after 2024, one thing, because the DNC didn't release their autopsy, a bunch of groups got together across the ecosystem that came from progressive, centrist, all different mindsets, and really compared notes. And one of the things they really called out was, there was a multitude of reasons why Kamala Harris didn't win. 170 days, biggest obstacle. Democrats and progressives on this side of the aisle like movements. They like to be part of something, and that requires an invitation. So I see you shaking your head, Rianne. Talk to me if that resonates with the group that you're working to engage and what you found in your studies.
Yes, definitely. One of the questions we actually asked on the survey is, where do people typically get their news source from? And a overwhelming answer, about 95%, social media, within 18 to 34, with a close being friends and family, actually. But I think with that, people feel connected through social media. It's easy to get people, well, I don't want to say it's easy, but you can create different visual effects and graphics and just send a simple social media message, and it kind of grabs at the heartstrings of a lot of people. So I think leveraging social media in a way to inspire other people to your cause is one way.
That is 100% true. I see Jocelyn shaking your head. The other thing that came out when I'm working with my candidates, there's in county parties, there's three things. That's number two. Number two is why we didn't succeed in 2024 is the media ecosystem. We need to better understand how to engage in that space because of where people get news, where people engage, where they create community. It is no longer, my phone's right here. It's no longer getting your information on broadcast TV. We call it cord cutting in my expertise. The cord has been cut. If you really think you're going to engage voters on TV, then that's not happening. So Jocelyn, talk to me about this information in regards, that's where they get their news. That's where they're connecting. That's where they're creating community. How do we get in there?
I want to really land on creating community because that was another one of our findings that really rose to the top and really impacted me. One of the questions we asked was, what is the best way to get your voice heard? And we had multiple choice, all these different options. Guess what the number one way to get your voice heard was? It was protests, going to protests.
Oh, interesting.
That ranked really high. Voting ranked really low.
Okay, and say more about that. Okay.
So that was very surprising, but yet I find a glimmer of hope in that.
Okay.
So what our takeaway was, building community. What if we shifted the narrative so that voting was not an individual activity, like going to the dentist, but instead was a community activity.
Mm-hmm.
And you are doing this with your fellow citizens in concert as a community and having your voice heard as a community. And that is why we think protests were really well valued, because I think that spirit of community, that feeling you are one of many, that your voice does make a difference. And this is why our organization and Count Us In was very, very involved with the congressional off-cycle redistricting issue last fall, because it really spoke to what these young adults were saying. They were saying, wait, we don't have a voice. You don't have a voice if the elections are rigged based upon gerrymandered districts. So true. But also, people came out to the State House every week for months.
Yeah, they did.
And were getting involved and part of communities. So one of my important takeaways from our research study was the value of building community. And I must say, I think there's something huge there. I must say, candidates have that opportunity to build community more than anyone. And the potential that a candidate has, any candidate has, to create community, we've seen this in other places across the country not too long ago, is enormous. That potential is enormous. So that's something that our organization is planning to do this year and especially this fall.
You're totally speaking my language because, as I come from it, from the marketing, how do we get messaging out there? How do we take your learnings and activate candidates so they can better understand how to implement these findings? When we say protest was the number one way that they could have their voice heard, that tracks. And what I mean by that, when we look at the funnel of how we bring voters down the engagement process, and in the marketing world too, is people go out to protest because they're triggered. They're upset. They see something happening in their community and they want to use their voice. It's the same thing when you go make a purchase. You're triggered by something. Your washing machine broken, or you're going to an event and you want a new pair of shoes. And then you take an action. You have to become aware of what your options are. You start that process and you educate your options and etc. What we are doing as folks wanting to see electoral change is these awareness opportunities happen, protest, but we're not moving people down to the next phase.
Correct. And
we're not right.
That is a huge missed opportunity. And I know Count Us In does a great job with outreach. Like, I think all of us need to step up and say, okay, if we're at a protest or a gathering or a town hall or whatever, like, we have to be sure while we have people together, we're also doing the education and creating that bridge to the next election.
Yeah.
So there's a No Kings protest happening at the end of March. There's a few days after that where registration for the primary is still open. We should be talking about that. We should be making sure people know there is a primary election in early May, right? So we all have work to do, but we can do this.
Yeah. That gives me so much hope. Rianne, I see you shaking your head. Add some conversation here because you really said about community too. What are you seeing with folks on the ground who want to participate and put their self out there? How do we get people to feel comfortable or want to participate and feel involved? And what are some things, if candidates and other activists are listening to this, how can we expand that reach and bring more people involved in civic engagement?
I think you just need to meet people honestly where they are. People are in different points of their lives, not only personally, financially, or even with their knowledge in the process. We do a lot of tabling, and this past summer we tabled at the Bloomington Pride Fest, and it was a whole lot of community going on there. So just definitely engaging people, meeting them where they are, smiling, being happy, being willing to just take the time out to get to know them, not only as an asset, but just as a human being as well. So, and definitely pairing that with the education piece is really important, and kind of tying, oh, you're interested in this. Have you considered this part of civic engagement? And it may resonate there.
For some people who might not know what tabling is, could you go a little deeper into what tabling is?
Yes, of course. That is just going to an event in your community, setting up your organization, and just being there to educate, support, and be a backbone for community members. For us, we offer voter registration resources on how you can get involved with our collective, which is just not only reserved for organizations, but for individuals who just are looking for a home to talk about what's going on in their communities. We have many individual members of all ages and across the state and a few outside of Indiana as well. So
That's awesome. Okay. So we have the No Kings protest coming up. Let's brainstorm together. So, Jocelyn, I'll toss it over to you. In your organization or any other organization out there or electoral candidates that want to grow community and they're showing up to the No Kings protest, what would be some suggestions you would give to them to give people what I like to call all volunteers or community people? I always see this in events where a lot of people show up and they want to get involved, but as leaders, we have to give them on ramps. So, how can we create some on ramps to let people go to that next level, whether it be consideration to join something, educate more? Give me some ideas, some really tangible, what your organization might be leaning into.
Yeah, so I have two. One is definitely educating about just the mechanics of voting. And as I
Okay.
said, our surveyed participants did not even know early voting was an option. So be able to share that information. Many don't know that there's a primary election in May. And so that's a good place to start. Importantly, almost half of our surveyed had never voted before. So please do not expect that these young adults have ever come to the polls before. So here's what you can expect. Here's what the machine's going to be like for you.
Mhm.
So, like voting 101, I think also provides that confidence that you
Mhm.
can you can do this even if you never have for the first time. And
Yeah.
secondly, for our organization, we are trying to identify what I would call just rock star young adults who have a heart for civic engagement. We have met many of them who want to create that community either on their college campus or in their neighborhood or in their clubs or social activities or social media network, and empowering them with the information and resources that they need to be a spokesperson. um, those rock star young adults will be able to speak to their peers much better than
Mhm.
someone like I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we want to be led by them. We want to empower them. We want to provide those resources across the state. And so what we are doing right now is identifying those folks and asking them to guide our steps because we've generated some money, we've generated some resources and manpower to help amplify their voices and help them be effective.
Yeah, that's really important. That's really key because a lot of times people just like, well, what do I do? And they get lost and a little confused and they're very excited. And then the No Kings protest is an opportunity to take that excitement and educate and bring people together to the next level. And I think you are really, we're going to get to the question in 2 seconds, but I think you really mentioned a good thing is protesting and educating at the same time. I remember in 2022 election, where there was a recount happening. I've said this before and I want to share it again because so more people can hear. Back to the education there, and when you do a provisional ballot because they went up to register and the person checking them in said, hey, I don't think you're registered here, the person says, yes, I am, they do a provisional ballot if there's a question, and then that gets looked at later. When the provisional ballots were counted, especially during this recount, was a very close election, a lot of those provisional ballots were actually excluded. They were actually not registered based on a technicality. They were registered, but they had moved and they didn't update their voter registration. It's a perfect example of how Indiana and the nation has made it very complicated and created those artificial barriers for people to participate in civics. So these are the types of things where people think, well, yeah, I've registered. I registered when I got my driver's license. Great. But if you've moved, which young people do, where they might be had been living with parents at the time, moved in with friends, gone to college, started a new job, circumstances changes. So that is, I see that happen all the time where people really say, I am registered, but there's the technicality part. So, Rianne, talk to me about some of the new projects that you're going to be working on to get ready for the primaries. Is there anything that folks can grab onto and get involved in? And then we'll get to that question that I saw. I just wanted to ask Rianne about projects that she has upcoming.
Yes, of course. Before that, I do want to kind of echo the registration
Sure.
piece, which is why we definitely make it a point to say, yes, you're registered, but let us help you check your registration. Let us make sure it's up to date and just really emphasizing that you should be checking that every election cycle, even in thinking of just purge votes ballots as well. So there's that. But on the project side, we're definitely looking to focus on our For Democracy campaign, which is focused on decarcerating, decolonizing, and defending disability justice, and kind of building out specific tracks based on interest, whether you have a higher interest in disability justice, justice impacted individuals, decolonization, and racial equity in the civic engagement space. So just looking to really build out those groups of people who are passionate about those different areas. And I think breaking it down that way helps people not feel so overwhelmed that, oh, there's so many different things to choose for. You can just kind of start with one, see how you feel. We're prepared to give all the training on nonpartisanship, just leadership development, and letting people go from there and create what they want in their campuses and communities. And then another plug is that our fellowship does open up every other year. So getting people in the pipeline for our Racial Justice and Accessibility Fellowship, provide a stipend, we provide specialized training. We have incredible board members who are in the legal field and nonprofit and just private sector, even a librarian, which is amazing. So getting people really involved in us as a group and showing that there are so many ways to volunteer.
Yeah, you bring out such a really good a piece of information. It's like, I'm going to get ahead of myself here. There's so much we need to do. And that's why the advocacy arm is so important, because they pick a lane and they stay really focused on a niche and they see the gap and what they're going to do. And that's the same thing when you want to get involved as a person. Is there's so much that sometimes you can feel a little frozen and a little overwhelmed. But what Rianne, you just called out was, reach out to your organization. There's different lanes, or there's different ways that you can get involved that align with what you want to get involved in. And it takes a little exploring, meeting new people, getting out there, but there are ways that you can dive in and unfreeze yourself, because sometimes it can feel overwhelming, but you folks have laid out a really good roadmap for people to find their way and to get involved. And I love the idea of the fellowship and getting people really involved with that, with the mentoring program. I see Josh had a question that was in the chat. Josh, do you want to pop that back up? Okay. Rianne mentioned people don't think their vote matters. How do we change that? Really good question. Thank you, audience member. Rianne, I want to toss that over to you, and then Jocelyn, I'll have you jump in.
One thing we actually do with Callison, with all of our staff, our volunteers, our fellows, that's actually a question that we ask. What would you tell somebody if they told you that they don't think that their vote matters? And I think approaching from a place of open-mindedness and kind of asking why, but as a means to change that, just breaking it down of, hey, you may not think your vote matters in maybe a presidential, but there are other areas of voting that matter just as much as the presidential election, your school board, your judicial circuit, and just kind of breaking it down that way so that people can hopefully open their minds to the other possibilities of voting. And then just kind of re-emphasizing the fact that you are important as a person. You live in your community that you serve, that you represent.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, your voice matters.
Yeah, it's really hard with the national noise because we can get lost in that. That feels a little distant. I always say policy happens on the federal level, to keep it a little bit more simple, but execution happens on the state level. And even more execution on where dollars are spent or happened in your local community. So when we start looking at it and work our way backwards, it really helps people see that through line, that when money is spent, it's decided in your local community, because that's how it really happens. Jocelyn, how would you answer that question when people say my vote doesn't matter? So how do you engage with folks that are in that space and they feel a little lost and they don't feel like participation is something they want to engage in because they haven't seen results?
Sure. I think so. Obviously, this is a very legitimate feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think Hoosiers of all ages feel this way. For those who could be impacted, reminding them about, look what Hoosiers did to oppose redistricting. I think that is a great example of Hoosier Voices Matter. Our state Senate Republicans couldn't have voted against redistricting without the voices of Hoosiers strengthening their spines. So I do like to go back to that amazing moment in Indiana that happened not long ago. I think, again, really inviting young adults in and listening to what they have to say and reflecting that their issues matter. I think saying that they're feeling, demonstrating genuinely that their voices and issues matter will translate to their votes matter too.
Mm-hmm.
I think more than just memes, I think meeting, as Rianne just said, meeting young adults where they are, and they want to trust candidates, and that means being genuine and honest with them.
Mm-hmm. I think those are excellent points. And the redistricting is such a good example. It was bottom up. We had something being presented to Hoosiers, and a lot of people were giving their hot takes of what happened. It was activists that realized we're not going to take this, and it was collective action together. It was a campaign. And that's what I love about the soft side is when you folks do a campaign or a study or a project, it lasts for 6 to 8 to 12 weeks. And that's when things start to resonate with people. The redistricting fight went on for a while. It was tiring. It was intense, but it allowed people to get educated, to understand the process, to see how it was going to impact. And then from my lens, what I also saw, which goes to the question that the audience member asked is, why did Indiana, such a red state where other states were like, okay, this is a done deal, it's Indiana, why were we able to push back? And when I look at the data analysis done in 2024 about how Hoosiers feel, I was looking at how to move independents and how to move movable Republicans. And when you look at their values, it's family first, trust and accountability, and safety with their family, friends, and neighbors. So when you think about what happened in redistricting, it was done without trust, behind closed doors. There was no accountability. We were not going to have accountability to our elected officials anymore. And that swatting really rubbed people the wrong way, regardless of what side of the aisle you're in. So it goes back to when we start talking and listening, finding out where people stand with their values and centering community and values, and start looking at what solutions we can solve in our communities. That's a recipe to start voter engagement and building back that trust. And that, to me, is like the secret sauce that we can all really lead into and create opportunities for people to get those on-ramps. And another question. I love this. Last State House cycle, my Democratic candidate lost 85 to 15. So how do we get people to care to vote? Really good question. Excellent question. I always go to the Marcus Flowers story in Georgia on this question. Change happens bottom up. When you're in some of the rural red areas, it feels overwhelming. But when you look at the 2020 election, and everybody always says we have to do what Georgia did. What did Georgia do? And this is my strategy mind. And I'd love to hear you folks after I kind of set this table here. In Georgia in 2022, Marcus Flowers was running against Marjorie Taylor Greene in a 35 plus Trump district. He was very charismatic. He was really good on social media with that rage, what we call rage bait donations. When Margie would do something crazy, he'd be like, did you see this? And he would really talk about it and talk about why it was something that was something that needed to be pointed out. He was able to raise close to $15 million. With those dollars, he was able to have a political director, have paid canvassers, have a very, very robust, active campaign on the ground. He had 3 or 4 field directors really engaging and delivering the Democratic message. Now, as a result of that district, prior to the last election cycle, he was able to raise the vote total by 10,000 votes. What happened in 2022 in Georgia? We won that state by a very close margin. And we also won the Senate because of Warnock and Ossoff in that election. So when you ask the question, what happens in my district when it's 85-15? It's what are you doing to impact the top of the ticket and the collective and getting that democratic message out? And it feels like a heavy lift, but it's being part of the team. And I also will say one other thing, and I'd love to hear Jocelyn and Rianne's response, is in some of the areas I've been on conversations with folks in Virginia after their 2025 victory. In districts like that, they formed what we call power packs, where they worked with candidates together to lift the organizing, to share collective resources, and also to get the message out there collectively and really impact their community. Because I cannot say this enough, whether it happens bottom up first, change happens locally first, solving the issues that matter closest to your voters in the community, and then it matriculates up. So, Rianne, I'd love to toss it over to you when you get that question that, oh, I live such a red area, why does it matter? How do you engage with that concern?
I think again, it is another very valid concern. I definitely want to say that first and foremost. But just because it is a red area now doesn't mean it can always be a red
Yeah.
area. And I think that's the
Mhm.
approach I want to take and kind of show people that, hey, like redistricting, community matters. If you can just gather a few people who care about this particular issue, kind of rally them around, they can get their friends, they can reach out to their networks. And as we discovered, a lot of people want to vote, they just may not know how to vote or may not have the
Mhm.
knowledge on the whether they can legally, if they, definitely if they've been impacted by incarceration, or if they're within the disability community, it may not be accessible. So there are so many people who do want to vote who just may not have the resources at that time, but that doesn't mean that they can't get them and receive them from others.
Yeah. Excellent. Jocelyn?
It takes change takes time, doesn't it?
Mhm.
And I know where I'm from in Hamilton County, not very long ago, no Democrat had ever been elected in Hamilton County. And now there are electeds. I was one. There are some right now, and there are numerous Democratic candidates on the ballot in Hamilton County more than ever. It it takes time, but I think the way to motivate people is you deserve to have your voice heard, and these incumbents or candidates in safe districts, they don't deserve a free pass.
Yes.
So please come out, have your voice heard. And even if next time 85-15 turns to 80-20, that's progress. And
Yeah.
it just takes time. And I think hope is everything. And I think even after disappointing elections, we must continue to have hope and know that we're building that community and working together.
Yeah. Jocelyn, that's such an excellent point. I say this all the time. We need to redefine what winning looks like. It's not always about winning that election. It's about building community. It's about inviting more people into the civic process. It's about, and I say this with candidates a lot who are thinking of running not this year, but maybe in 2028 or in the municipal elections in 2027. What is happening in your community that needs solving now? Can you get involved in that process and bring change about now? Because that's what people want. They want a new town pool. They want a community center. They want transportation. You know, I was just down in Knox, and the college young people do not have public transportation and they can't get around. And the Ubers are not accessible. It's not as a vast infrastructure down there. So, what can you dive into as community members to start solving now? And that's how you earn the vote. And that's how it's not about Democrat or Republican anymore. It's about who's serving the community. You know, and that's so. Oh, good. Another good question. Older demographics have negative view of TikTok. Should candidates be careful when they use Gen Z social platforms? How do you get Gen Z? Whoops, I didn't read the rest of it. How do you get Gen Z and not unpro and not look unpro, look unprofessional? Is that what the question is? Rihanna, do you want to start that answer with the TikTok question? Josh, can you keep the banner up there for a second?
Yes, definitely. Um, I do think that candidates should be using TikTok because times are changing, technology is changing, and it's just another means to reach a lot of people. I know we talked a lot about younger voters. A lot of younger voters are actually on TikTok, and you'd be surprised there are a handful of older demographic topics that are also on TikTok, whether it be for news or even just simple entertainment. So I think it's definitely another avenue on how to reach people. Now, as far as the
Yeah,
looking unprofessional, I do think that is
I'm professional.
yeah, I do think that is up to personal interpretation. However, I think finding new ways to engage people, and even if it is through a slightly comedic lens, you can definitely implement a element of seriousness there as well, which kind of leads into that professional and getting the message across.
Yeah. For me, when candidates asked me that question, it didn't quite land with me. But I understand where you're coming from now. Authenticity. I tell the story of Ed Markey back in Massachusetts a lot, where he was running against Joe Kennedy the third, a younger candidate challenging an established senator candidate. And Ed Markey is older, and he has always been an environmentalist, but he put his head down and was doing the work. So when he got challenged by Joe Kennedy the third, what was happening was he was like, oh, his team was like, oh, I gotcha. He's had his head down. He was doing the work. Insofar as when AOC came to Congress, looked up Ed Markey and said, hey, we need to partner together. We believe in the same things. How can I learn from you all the work that you're already doing? So that's how they got the Green New Deal started to move the needle forward. So when he was up for election, AOC had, I need to teach you a few things about how to share what you've been doing on the social media platforms. So she took him under her wing and decided to teach her about TikTok. Fast forward, Ed Markey won that election on environmental issues with the 18 to 29-year-olds. That's where he moved the needle and pushed it over the edge for him. So it is important platform, how to get authentic on it. Just be yourself and show up, but people will listen if you find that way to connect on the issues that matter to those voters. Yeah, I see Jocelyn shaking your head. Do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I just agree with that completely. And I'll circle back to what I said earlier. Like, my recommendation for candidates is twofold. One is, please reach out to young adults to coach you.
Yes.
They know and they can provide you that confidence to articulate your message clearly and use the tools that are available to you. And then secondly, I think we all appreciate becoming a candidate is one of the bravest things anyone can ever do. It takes guts. But I highly recommend candidates just lean into that vulnerability and don't worry if a TikTok video is perfection. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be perfection. Back to what you said, Mary, it needs to be genuine. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be honest, and just be vulnerable and just try. But you cannot ignore, you have to reach, especially the young adult demographic where they are. And
Mhm.
that means doing some things and trying new things maybe you have never done before, but you can do it.
Yeah. And one final note to make someone feel comfortable is to when you get on those platforms, it's not about you. So recenter the community you're trying to reach. Bring them into the conversation. Go interview young folks. Find out what matters to them. Center them as part of the conversation. And that's an avenue to get more comfortable and be in partnership with the community you're trying to reach. So I say this all the time. It's not about you. It's about the community you're trying to reach, the solutions you're trying to solve. But I think with social media, we get so nervous because it's like, we're going to be on the camera. It's about me. No, just go out there and connect with your community. I see, Rianne, you're shaking your head. I'd love to have your thoughts on that because this is your space.
I think people can tell authenticity and tell if you genuinely care. So if you're going to fake it, it is unfortunately going to show through. And I think it's going to increase that distrust people may have in their politicians. So just definitely being yourself and figuring out what your constituents care about and taking a genuine
Mhm.
effort to learn from them, find out potential solutions on their end, and just making that very proactive approach based on what you're seeing now and what could they anticipate in the future, and just really showing that you are there for them because as you said, it's not about the individual, it is about the community that they are trying to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Josh, any more final questions before I close us out with some final thoughts? We good? I don't see any questions popping up. Okay. Jocelyn, any final thoughts where people can find you? We'll put that stuff in the show notes, but any final thoughts before we close out for the afternoon?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. So thank you for this conversation. If you or someone you know would be interested in partnering with us, we're especially reaching out to young adult voices. Please go to recenterindiana.org. There you will see not only our research study findings, but our call out for young adults. And we are just hoping to be led by their voices, ideas, and suggestions. So please spread the word. And thanks, Mary. And I'd like to thank Rianne too. It is always so good to be at your side.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And Rianne, as the Deputy Director of Count Us In, I'd love to hear your final thoughts and share with the audience what your organization's up to, how they can reach out to you, and what's in the future for our young participants to get involved.
One thing that I'm really excited for in the future is bringing joy back to voting. We actually hosted a Joy to the
Mhm.
Polls event a few years ago, and I think it was a really big hit with the community. Ice cream trucks, joy, and just education. So definitely trying to find joy in this work, and I think that's something that's really important to us going forward. And as far as how to reach us, you can be reached at countusindiana.org or count us in on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. And super grateful to be here and get to speak with you, Jocelyn and Marion. And thank you both so much.
I really thank you both for this robust conversation. I learned a lot. I hope our audience learned a lot. We've recorded this. This is going to go out. Please, please share it. We've got two great resources that are doing the work, boots on the ground. And as Jocelyn said, as Rianne said, there is an invitation for people to get involved. And I love, I'm a foodie. I love the idea, candidates, if you're listening, during voter registration or having a group go to the polls together, get a food truck, get, a taco truck, get an ice cream truck, get a coffee. I'm into coffee right now. Get a coffee food truck and have people get excited and do the collective work together. Because the more we build community, the more we're going to build the trust back and see the change in our community. So thank you again for joining us. And thank you, audience, for joining us. Really, really great questions. Join us next week when we talk with some of the folks that are elected officials that are closest to the voters, our county council folks, and our trustees, for a nice, robust conversation on that level of civic engagement and how we can work to change things in the community and the work they're actually doing right now. So thank you again, everybody, for listening, and have a great afternoon and a great Valentine's weekend. Thank you.